Commander Kriegstahl stared at the swirling blue and green marble below through the viewport of the scholarly pursuit, his four eyes blinking in sequence as he processed the data streaming across his neural interface. Oh, how thrilling. Another backwater planet filled with primitive life forms that probably hadn't even figured out interstellar travel yet. The Galactic Bestiary Commission really knew how to pick the exciting assignments. Commander, Doctor. Nerva Toth's voice crackled through the comm system, her tone carrying that familiar mix of scientific enthusiasm and barely concealed condescension. Preliminary scans indicate this world, what do the locals call it again? Earth? Contains an unusually high concentration of apex predators. The biodiversity readings are, well, they're quite remarkable for such a young planetary system. Kriegstahl's mandibles clicked together in what passed for a sigh among his species. Remarkable? Yes, I'm sure the Commission will be absolutely fascinated by yet another collection of fang-bearing, claw-wielding meat-eaters. As if we haven't catalogued enough of those already. He turned to face the bridge crew, his elongated torso swiveling with practiced ease. Specialist Clem Rowe, what's our descent trajectory looking like? The navigation specialist, a compact being whose 6 arms moved across the control panels with mechanical precision, responded without looking up from his instruments. We've identified a suitable landing zone in what appears to be a largely uninhabited wilderness area. Dense forest cover, minimal electromagnetic signatures, and according to our scans, a healthy population of the local predator species. Should be perfect for our observation mission. Navigator Brix Wynn, whose role involved more than just piloting thanks to her expertise in xenobiology, added with a hint of amusement, the energy readings from the planet's surface are interesting. Lots of organic activity. But also some curious technological signatures scattered about. Nothing too advanced, mind you, probably just some primitive civilization that's barely discovered fire. Primitive civilizations. Kriegstahl muttered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. How delightfully quaint. I do hope they haven't interfered too much with the natural ecosystem. Nothing ruins a good predator study like having the local wildlife disrupted by some club-wielding primitives. The descent through Earth's atmosphere proved uneventful, though Kriegstahl couldn't help but notice how the planet's magnetic field seemed remarkably stable, almost as if it had been that was ridiculous. No species this young could possibly have developed planetary engineering capabilities. They touched down in a clearing surrounded by towering trees that swayed in the gentle breeze, their leaves rustling with a sound that the ship's audio processors translated into something almost musical. The air composition readings showed optimal breathing conditions for their species, which was convenient. At least they wouldn't need to wear those cumbersome environmental suits. Deployment team, prepare for surface operations, Kriegstahl announced, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had done this exact same routine on dozens of worlds. Standard predator observation protocol. Set up the camouflaged monitoring stations, deploy the bioscanners, and try not to disturb the local wildlife too much. We're here to observe, not to interfere. Dr. Nerva Toth was the first to emerge from the ship, her scientific instruments already humming with activity as she began cataloging the immediate environment. Fascinating. The soil composition indicates a remarkably complex ecosystem. And these trees, they're not just growing randomly. There's almost a pattern to their distribution. Within hours, their observation equipment was operational, and the team began their systematic study of Earth's apex predators. The results were, admittedly, impressive. The planet boasted an array of formidable creatures, massive brown bears with claws that could rend steel, pack-hunting wolves with coordination that would make a military unit proud, and great cats whose stealth capabilities rivaled those of the galaxy's most accomplished assassins. Now this is more like it, Specialist Clem Rowe remarked as he watched a grizzly bear demonstrate its fishing technique through the monitoring feeds. Look at those claws. And the bite force readings are off the charts. These creatures could probably take down a Thracian battle beast without breaking a sweat. But as the days passed, something began to bother Dr. Nerva Toth. Something that didn't quite fit the expected patterns of apex predator behavior. Commander, she said, her voice carrying a note of confusion, I'm noticing some unusual behavioral patterns in the local predator populations. Unusual how? Kriegstahl asked, though his tone suggested he was expecting another routine observation about territorial disputes or mating rituals. They seemed to be avoiding certain areas. Large swaths of territory that should be prime hunting grounds are being systematically ignored by every major predator species we've catalogued. It's as if they're afraid of something. Navigator Brix Wynn looked up from her bioscanner readings, her expression puzzled. That's actually correct. I'm seeing the same patterns. These apex predators, creatures that should fear nothing on this primitive world, are actively avoiding specific regions. And the strange thing is, these regions don't show any obvious environmental hazards or competing predator species. Maybe there's something we're missing, Specialist Clem Rose suggested, but though his tone carried the lazy confidence of someone who assumed they understood everything about primitive worlds. Perhaps some kind of natural phenomenon? Electromagnetic anomalies? Toxic plant life? Kriextal's 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the data feeds. The patterns were indeed strange. Here was a world filled with what should have been the dominant predator species, yet they were all clustered in specific areas, leaving vast territories completely uninhabited. It was almost as if something else was claiming those territories, something that made even the most formidable predators nervous. "Keep monitoring," he commanded, though for the first time since landing, his voice carried a hint of genuine curiosity rather than bored professionalism. "And expand our scanning range. If there's something out there that can make a pack of wolves think twice about entering an area, I want to know what it is." Little did Commander Kriextal know that the answer to his question was already watching them. 3 days into their mission, Specialist Clem Rowe's instruments began detecting what he initially dismissed as equipment malfunction. "Commander, I'm picking up some rather odd energy signatures from the restricted zones. They're too regular to be natural phenomena." Dr. Nerva Toth looked up from her predator behavioral analysis, her scientific curiosity piqued despite herself. "Regular how? Are we talking about geological formations? Crystalline structures, perhaps?" No, nothing like that," Clem Rowe replied, his 6 arms dancing across the sensor array with increasing agitation. "These readings suggest structures, artificial constructions. But that's impossible, right? Our preliminary scans indicated this world has barely achieved basic tool use." Commander Kriextal's mandibles clicked together in annoyance. "Specialist, I hardly think a few primitive mud huts constitute a threat to apex predators. Unless these creatures have developed some kind of irrational fear of basic architecture." "Actually, Commander," Navigator Brix Wynn interjected, her voice carrying that particular tone scientists used when they were about to complicate everyone's day. "I'm detecting similar anomalies across multiple continents. These aren't just isolated incidents. The energy signatures are extensive, and they're all concentrated in areas where the predator populations show the most pronounced avoidance behaviors." Kriextal's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sure sign of mounting irritation. "Fine. Deploy the long-range scanners. Let's see what these primitive architects have been busy constructing that has our precious apex predators so terrified." The high-resolution scans that came back made the entire team fall silent. The images showed not primitive mud huts, but vast networks of structures that stretched across continents. The roads that carved through landscapes with geometric precision, buildings that rose toward the sky in defiance of gravity. And moving throughout these structures were creatures, hairless bipeds, Dr. Nerva Toth observed, her voice flat with disbelief. "The dominant species on this planet appears to be hairless bipeds. With no claws, no fangs, no natural armor, and apparently no common sense about proper predator design." Specialist Clem Rowe zoomed in on several of the creatures, his instruments analyzing their physical capabilities. "Their bite force is pathetic. Their running speed is mediocre at best. They have no natural weapons whatsoever. And look at this, they're not even covered in proper protective hide. Their skin looks like it would tear if you looked at it wrong. These can't be predators," Navigator Brix Wynn declared with scientific certainty. "They're obviously some kind of herbivorous scavenger species. Maybe they've learned to avoid areas where the real predators hunt. That would explain the territorial patterns we've been observing." But as they continued their surveillance, the bipeds' behavior became increasingly puzzling. Rather than scavenging or fleeing from danger, they were engaged in activities that defied easy categorization. Some were manipulating the soil in organized patterns, placing small plants in neat rows. Others were constructing additional structures using materials that seemed to appear from nowhere. And strangest of all, many of them were engaged in what could only be described as purposeless physical activities. What exactly are they doing? Tal demanded, watching a group of the bipeds chase a small spherical object around a flat area while making incomprehensible vocalizations. I believe, Dr. Nerva Toth said slowly, they're playing. It appears to be some form of recreational activity. Playing? Clemro's voice rose an octave. Apex predators don't play. They hunt, they eat, they reproduce, they establish dominance hierarchies. They don't run around in circles chasing balls. Well, clearly these aren't apex predators, Brixwin replied with the patience of someone explaining the obvious to a child. They're probably just really successful herbivores. Maybe they've developed some kind of sophisticated agricultural system that allows them to support large populations without competing with the actual predators. But Dr. Nerva Toth was frowning at her data feeds, her scientific mind struggling with an uncomfortable realization. Wait a moment. If these creatures are merely herbivorous agriculturalists, then why are our scanned apex predators not simply ignoring them? Predators typically show no fear response to herbivores, especially weak-looking ones like these. She pulled up the behavioral analysis charts, her expression growing increasingly troubled. Look at these patterns. Every single predator species on this planet bears, wolves, large cats, even the aquatic hunters, they're not just avoiding areas where these bipeds are present. They're showing active fear responses, stress hormones elevated, rapid retreat behaviors, even abandonment of established territories. That's ridiculous, Tal snorted. What could possibly make a grizzly bear afraid of a hairless, clawless biped that spends its time playing with spherical objects and arranging plants in rows? The question hung in the air like a challenge to the natural order of things. Dr. Nerva Toth continued studying the data, her unease growing with each passing moment. She watched as a group of the bipeds gathered around what appeared to be a controlled fire, making those strange vocalizations while manipulating various objects with their manipulator appendages. "Commander," she said slowly, "I'm beginning to think we might be missing something important here. These creatures, they're using tools, sophisticated tools. And that fire, they're not just using it for warmth. They're actually changing the chemical composition of their food before consumption. Food preparation is hardly uncommon," Clemro dismissed. "Lots of species process their food before eating." "Yes. But look at the variety of tools they're using. Look at the complexity of their constructions. Look at their organizational structures." Dr. Nerva Toth's voice was gaining urgency. "These aren't primitive scavengers. These are I don't know what these are." Navigator Brixwin was studying the long-range sensor data with growing confusion. The energy signatures from their settlements are becoming clearer. They're not just using fire for food preparation. They're generating controlled electrical currents, manipulating electromagnetic fields, even producing what appear to be complex chemical compounds. "Impossible," Tal declared. "No species develops advanced technology while remaining physically defenseless. It's contrary to every evolutionary principle we've documented." And yet, Dr. Nerva Toth said quietly, here they are, hairless, clawless, seemingly helpless bipeds who have somehow managed to make every apex predator on their planet afraid to enter their territory. The implications of her words settled over the team like a cold blanket. If these bipeds weren't apex predators in the traditional sense, then what were they? And more importantly, what did they possess that made creatures evolved for hunting and killing choose to avoid them entirely? "Commander, Dr. Nerva Toth said, her voice carrying a note of scientific determination mixed with growing dread, "I recommend we conduct closer observation of these bipeds. Standard protocol suggests maintaining distance from unknown species, but I believe we need to understand what we're dealing with here." Tal looked at the strange creatures on his screen, watching them continue their incomprehensible activities with apparent contentment. How dangerous could a species be if they spent their time playing games and growing vegetables? Very well, he decided, but we maintain full camouflage and absolutely no direct contact. We're here to observe, not to interfere with whatever bizarre ecosystem these creatures have developed. If only he had known that the decision to observe more closely would reveal truths that would shake the very foundations of their understanding of what it meant to be a predator. The closer surveillance began at dawn the following day, and within hours Dr. Nerva Toth was beginning to regret her scientific curiosity. What had seemed like harmless, bumbling herbivores from a distance was revealing itself to be something far more unsettling. "Commander," she called out, her voice tight with controlled anxiety, "you need to see this. I've been observing one of their settlements, and their problem-solving capabilities are concerning." Kriextal approached her monitoring station with the casual confidence of someone who assumed he was about to observe primitive tool use. Perhaps they had figured out how to sharpen sticks or stack rocks. How delightfully quaint. What he saw instead made his mandibles freeze mid-click. One of the bipeds was standing before a broken mechanical device, manipulating it with those peculiar 5-digit appendages. But this wasn't random tinkering. The creature was systematically diagnosing the problem, removing components, modifying them, and reassembling the device with surgical precision. That's quite sophisticated, Kriextal admitted reluctantly. But surely this is just basic mechanical repair. Nothing that would threaten apex predators. "Keep watching," Dr. Nerva Toth said grimly. The biped finished its repair work and then did something that made the alien observation team collectively hold their breath. It began modifying the device further, adding components that hadn't been there originally, improving its design in real time. Within minutes, the device was not only functional but demonstrably superior to its original configuration. "They're not just using tools," Specialist Clem Rowe whispered, his 6 arms trembling slightly. "They're creating new tools, improving existing tools. They're thinking. All intelligent species think," Navigator Brixwin replied, though her voice lacked conviction. "The question is what they're thinking about." The answer to that question came in the form of their intercepted communications. The team had been monitoring the biped's electromagnetic transmissions for days, and their translation algorithms had finally cracked the linguistic patterns. What they found was a window into a collective consciousness that spanned their entire planet. "They call themselves humans," Dr. Nerva Toth reported, her voice carrying the tone of someone delivering a medical diagnosis. "And they've been busy. Very, very busy." The historical records that flowed through their communications networks painted a picture that grew more disturbing with each passing revelation. These humans had not evolved alongside the apex predators they were observing. They had systematically eliminated them. "Listen to this, Doctor," Nerva Toth said, playing back a translated segment about something called the Pleistocene extinctions. "They speak casually about eliminating entire species, mammoth creatures, saber-toothed cats, massive bears. They didn't just hunt them for food, they hunted them into complete extinction." "That's impossible," Kriextal protested, though his voice was losing its earlier certainty. "No species eliminates its competition so thoroughly. It's ecologically unsustainable." "And yet," Dr. Nerva Toth continued, her tone growing more horrified, "they didn't stop there. They domesticated the survivors. Look at this footage." The screen showed humans interacting with creatures that were clearly descended from wolves, but these wolves were behaving like servants. They followed human commands, performed complex tasks, and seemed genuinely happy to do so. Other creatures, descended from wild cats, were living in human dwellings, purring contentedly while humans manipulated their bodies in what appeared to be ritualistic grooming. "They've turned apex predators into pets," Navigator Brixian said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They've taken creatures that should be competing with them for dominance and turned them into companions." But it was the observation of human offspring that truly shattered their understanding of what they were dealing with. Specialist Clem Rowe had been monitoring what appeared to be recreational activities among the smaller humans, assuming they were observing some form of play behavior. "Commander," he said, his voice shaking. "I don't think these young ones are playing. I think they're training." The activities looked innocent enough at first glance. Young humans chasing each other through obstacle courses, throwing objects at targets, engaging in mock combat with various implements. But the more the team analyzed the patterns, the more they realized they were watching the systematic development of hunting skills, strategic thinking, and combat effectiveness. "This one," Clem Rowe said, pointing to a small human who couldn't have been more than a few years old, just demonstrated advanced tactical reasoning. It used misdirection, coordinated with allies, and executed a flanking maneuver that would impress a military strategist. "But it's just a child," Brixwin protested. "Surely they're not actually training their offspring for warfare?" The answer came from their continued monitoring of human communications. The bipeds had not only eliminated their natural predators and domesticated their competition, but they had also turned their considerable problem-solving abilities toward eliminating each other. Their historical records were filled with accounts of increasingly sophisticated methods of organized violence. "They call it warfare," Dr. Nerva Toth reported, her voice now carrying the flat tone of someone in shock. "They've developed it into an art form. Strategies, tactics, weapons that can eliminate hundreds of individuals simultaneously. And they don't just fight over territory or resources, they fight over ideas, concepts, abstract principles." "This is madness," Kriegstall muttered, his four eyes blinking in rapid succession. "No species survives by constantly fighting itself." "But they do survive," Dr. Nerva Toth pointed out. "In fact, they thrive. Every conflict seems to accelerate their technological development. They learn from each encounter, adapt their strategies, and emerge stronger than before." The most chilling revelation came when they analyzed human population distribution and resource management. These bipeds had not only conquered their planet's apex predators, but they had systematically reshaped the entire ecosystem to serve their purposes. Vast areas of land had been converted to food production using techniques that maximized efficiency with scientific precision. Rivers had been redirected. Mountains had been carved through. Even the climate was being manipulated through industrial processes. "They've terraformed their own world," Navigator Brixwin said, her voice filled with awe and terror. "They've turned their entire planet into a machine designed to support their population. And look at their population numbers," Specialist Clem Rowe added, his instruments displaying statistics that defied belief. "Billions of them. Billions. Most apex predator species maintain populations in the thousands at most. These humans have achieved population densities that should be impossible for any large organism. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of human civilization was how they had achieved all of this without any natural weapons. No claws, no fangs, no armored hide, no venom. They had conquered their world using nothing but their ability to think, plan, and cooperate on a scale that dwarfed anything the galactic community had ever encountered. "They're pack hunters," Dr. Nerva Toth realized, her voice carrying the weight of terrible understanding. "But not like wolves or any other species we've studied. They're pack hunters with no upper limit to their pack size. They can coordinate the activities of millions of individuals toward a single objective. And they never stop adapting," Kriegstall added, watching footage of humans working together to solve problems that would challenge the most advanced civilizations. "Every obstacle they encounter becomes an opportunity to develop new capabilities. They don't just overcome challenges, they transform them into advantages." The team sat in stunned silence, processing the implications of their discoveries. They had come to catalog Earth's apex predators, expecting to find the usual collection of fang-bearing, claw-wielding hunters. Instead, they had found something far more terrifying, a species that had eliminated all competition not through superior physical attributes, but through superior intelligence, cooperation, and an apparently limitless capacity for adaptation. "Commander," Dr. Nerva Toth said quietly, "I don't think we're observing apex predators. I think we're observing something entirely new, something that transcends traditional predator-prey relationships." "What do you mean?" Kriegstall asked, though part of him already knew the answer. "I mean," she replied, "that we're looking at a species that doesn't just hunt other species. They hunt reality itself. They identify problems, stalk solutions, and kill impossibility with systematic efficiency. They've turned their entire existence into a hunting expedition against the limitations of their environment. And somewhere in the back of all their minds, a terrifying question was beginning to form: if humans could do all of this to their own planet, what would they do when they finally turned their attention to the stars? The answer to that question came sooner than any of them expected, and in the most mundane way possible. Commander Creeks Tao was reviewing the daily surveillance reports when Specialist Clem Rowe's panicked voice crackled through the communications system. "Commander? Emergency. We have been compromised. The humans have found us." Creeks Tao's 4 eyes snapped to the monitoring feeds, where he saw the impossible. 2 humans were standing directly in front of their supposedly invisible observation post, but staring at it with unmistakable curiosity. The camouflage systems that had fooled apex predators across a dozen worlds were apparently useless against creatures that had spent their evolutionary history hunting problems rather than prey. "How did they find us?" Dr. Nerva Toth demanded, her voice rising to near hysteria. "Our stealth technology is flawless. We've used it to observe Thracian death worms without detection." "I don't know," Clem Rowe replied, his 6 arms frantically working the controls. "They just walked up to us. One of them pointed at our position and said something to the other one, and now they're both standing there looking at us." On the screen, the 2 humans appeared to be engaged in conversation, occasionally gesturing toward the hidden observation post. They were wearing what appeared to be recreational clothing and carrying packs filled with supplies. Their behavior suggested they were engaged in some form of leisure activity, which made their casual detection of advanced alien technology all the more unsettling. "What do we do?" Navigator Brixwin asked, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Standard protocol for accidental contact with primitive species is immediate withdrawal, but they've already seen us." "They're primitive." Creeks Tao snapped, his mandibles clicking with stress. "They can't possibly understand what they're looking at. We maintain position and wait for them to lose interest and move on." But the humans showed no signs of losing interest. Instead, one of them approached the observation post and began examining it with the same systematic attention they had observed earlier. The human's hands moved across the camouflage surface, apparently feeling for seams or access points. "Commander," Dr. Nerva Toth said, her voice now carrying the flat tone of someone accepting the inevitable, "I think we need to consider the possibility that these humans are not as primitive as we assumed." As if summoned by her words, the human's manipulations of the observation post's exterior triggered something, and a section of the camouflage flickered and failed. The human stepped back, said something to its companion, and both of them began making sounds that the translation software identified as laughter. "They're laughing," Specialist Clem Rowe observed with horror. "They've exposed our position and they're laughing about it." "Maybe they think it's some kind of natural phenomenon?" Navigator Brixien suggested hopefully. "Or perhaps they believe it's technology from their own species?" That hope was shattered when one of the humans called out in a voice that their translation systems rendered as surprisingly friendly. "Hello in there. We know you're not from around here, but there's no need to hide. We're not going to hurt you." The alien team froze. The humans not only knew they were there, but they had correctly deduced that they were non-terrestrial in origin. And worse, they were inviting them to make contact. "This is a trap," Creeks Tao declared, his voice carrying the certainty of someone who had read too many military reports. "They're trying to lure us out so they can capture us for study or elimination." "Actually," Dr. Nerva Toth said slowly, "I think they're just being friendly. And that's what terrifies me." The humans waited patiently outside the observation post, occasionally making encouraging sounds and gestures. When it became clear that the aliens were not immediately emerging, one of them reached into their pack and withdrew what appeared to be food items, which they placed on the ground near the observation post's entrance. "They're feeding us," Navigator Brixwin observed with bewilderment. "Like we're some kind of nervous wildlife that needs to be coaxed out of hiding." "It's a dominance display," Creeks Tao insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. "They're demonstrating their control over resources. Classic predator behavior." "Or doctor." Nerva said with growing dread. They're genuinely trying to welcome us. Which, according to every xenobiological study I've ever read, is exactly what apex predators do when they encounter new species. They assess the threat level, determine that the newcomers are not competition, and attempt to integrate them into their territorial structure. The humans continued their patient vigil, occasionally making what sounded like reassuring vocalizations. Finally, one of them spoke again. Look, we understand this might be scary for you, but we promise we're friendly. My name is Marcus, and this is my hiking partner, Elena. We're from the nearby town, and we've been tracking some unusual energy readings in this area for the past few days. They've been tracking us, Specialist Clem Rowe whispered in horror, for days. These primitive creatures have been monitoring our supposedly undetectable technology. We're not government agents or anything like that, the human called Elena added cheerfully. Marcus here is an amateur radio enthusiast, and I work in atmospheric research. We're just curious about what you're doing out here. Are you scientists too? The casual way they discussed their detection of alien technology made the observation team's situation even more surreal. These humans were treating first contact with an extraterrestrial species like a chance encounter with interesting neighbors. Commander, Dr. Nerva said, her voice carrying a note of scientific fascination mixed with existential dread, I think we need to respond. They're not going away, and they clearly know we're here. Absolutely not, Kriextal replied firmly. We maintain position and wait for them to lose interest. But the humans showed no signs of losing interest. Instead, they began discussing their findings with the casual expertise of individuals who regularly encountered the impossible and treated it as routine. The energy signature is definitely artificial, Marcus was saying. But it's not using any terrestrial technology I recognize. The power source alone would require theoretical physics that we're still decades away from practical application. And the camouflage system, Elena added, it's not just visual distortion. It's manipulating electromagnetic radiation across multiple spectrums simultaneously. This is technology that makes our most advanced stealth systems look like children's toys. They understand our technology, Navigator Bricks In said faintly. They're casually discussing theoretical physics that most galactic civilizations consider advanced research topics. Oh, and if you're worried about government interference, Marcus called out, don't be. We've already decided not to report this to any official agencies. Humanity's track record with first contact scenarios is, well, let's just say we prefer to handle these situations with a bit more nuance than our governments typically manage. They have contingency plans for first contact, Dr. Nerva realized. They've thought about this scenario and developed protocols for it. Of course they have, Kriextal muttered. They probably have contingency plans for everything. Elena was now discussing their species' space exploration programs with the casual pride of someone describing a successful hobby project. We've got permanent settlements on our moon, robotic explorers throughout our solar system, and we're working on interstellar probe designs. Nothing like what you folks have obviously achieved, but we're making progress. And just last week, Marcus added with enthusiasm, we successfully tested a new fusion reactor design that should make interplanetary travel much more practical. Oh, and we finally got our quantum communication array working consistently. Still working out the bugs, but the potential applications are fascinating. They're casually discussing technology that rivals our own, Specialist Clem Rowe observed with growing horror. And they're treating it like it's no big deal. But it was Elena's next comment that finally shattered Dr. Nerva composure. We promise we're harmless. Well, mostly harmless. I mean, we did accidentally split the atom and create weapons that can destroy entire cities, but we're generally pretty good about not using those unless absolutely necessary. Dr. Nerva stared at the screen in stunned silence. Then, slowly, she began to laugh. Not the pleasant laughter of amusement, but the brittle, desperate laughter of someone whose worldview had just collapsed completely. They did it, she said between gasps of hysterical laughter. They actually did it. We came here looking for apex predators, and we found them. We found the most successful apex predators in the galaxy, and they're offering U.S. sandwiches and friendly conversation. And Dr. Toth? Commander Kriextal said uncertainly. Don't you see? She continued, her laughter taking on a manic edge. They're not just apex predators. They're apex predators who have convinced themselves they're friendly. They've weaponized niceness. They've turned hospitality into a hunting strategy. Outside, the humans were still waiting patiently, occasionally making encouraging sounds and discussing their eagerness to help with whatever research the aliens were conducting. And somehow, that made everything infinitely more terrifying. What happened next could only be described as the most undignified retreat in the history of galactic xenobiology. Commander Kriextal's composure finally cracked completely when the humans began offering to share their trail mix and asking if the aliens needed directions to the nearest town. Emergency evacuation. Now. Everyone back to the ship immediately. He screamed, his mandibles clicking so rapidly they sounded like malfunctioning machinery. The team abandoned their expensive monitoring equipment and fled through the forest like prey animals escaping a nightmare. Behind them, they could hear the humans calling out helpful suggestions about safe hiking paths and reminders to stay hydrated. They're following us. Specialist Clem Rowe shrieked as he stumbled over a fallen log, his 6 arms flailing wildly. No, they're not. Dr. Nerva Toth shouted back, her own panic reaching new heights. They're just giving us directions. They're being helpful. That's what makes them so terrifying. The Scholarly Pursuit's engines were already spinning up before the team reached the ship. Navigator Brix Wynn had initiated emergency departure protocols the moment she heard Commander Kriextal's retreat order. Within minutes, they were ascending through Earth's atmosphere at maximum velocity, leaving behind a planet that had fundamentally altered their understanding of predation, intelligence, and the nature of civilized behavior. The journey back to galactic space was marked by heated arguments about their official report. The evidence they had gathered was undeniable, but the implications were so disturbing that none of them wanted to be responsible for sharing them with the wider galactic community. We can't tell them the truth, Specialist Clem Rowe argued. If Galactic Command learns that there's a species that can eliminate competition through friendship and cooperation, it will cause panic throughout the civilized systems. But we have to report something, Navigator Brix Wynn insisted. We were sent to catalog apex predators, and we found something. Commander Kriextal, who had been staring out at the stars with the hollow expression of someone who had witnessed cosmic horror, finally spoke. We classify Earth as quarantine level, absolute. No contact, no observation, no exploration. We mark it as a restricted system and recommend that all civilized species avoid it entirely. But what reason do we give? Dr. Nerva Toth asked. We tell them the truth, Kriextal replied grimly. Earth is inhabited by apex predators so successful that they've transcended traditional predator-prey relationships. They're friendly, helpful, curious, and absolutely terrifying. They've eliminated their competition not through violence, but through superior intelligence, cooperation, and disturbing tendency to adopt other species as pets. His final log entry became legendary throughout the galactic community, though few believed it was anything more than an elaborate joke. Personal log, Commander Kriextal, Galactic Survey Vessel Scholarly Pursuit. Mission status complete disaster. Earth is inhabited by hairless bipeds who have conquered their planet through the weaponization of niceness. They offer food to strangers, help with research projects, and casually discuss technology that could reshape galactic civilization. Recommendation: avoid at all costs. These creatures are so apex they don't even realize they're predators. End log. The irony was not lost on any of them that they were fleeing from the friendliest species they had ever encountered. As the Scholarly Pursuit engaged its faster-than-light drive and prepared to leave the Sol system forever, Dr. Nerva Toth made one final check of their sensor arrays. What she found made her blood turn cold. Commander, she said quietly, we're being tracked. Impossible, Kriextal replied. No species this young could possibly have faster-than-light detection capability. Tell that to the 3 artificial satellites that have been monitoring our departure, Dr. Nerva Toth said. her voice carrying the flat tone of someone who had given up being surprised by human capabilities. They're broadcasting our trajectory, speed, and estimated destination on multiple frequencies. They're tracking us, Navigator Brixwin whispered. Of course they are, Dr. Nerva Toth replied with bitter resignation. They probably want to make sure we got home safely. After all, that's what friendly apex predators do. They take care of everyone in their territory, even the ones trying to escape from them.